Okay, just to kick us off, again, my name is Emily Wildhaber. I'm interviewing Karen Williams at her home in Lee Summit, Missouri, as part of the Midwest Genealogy Center's Englewood Theater Community Archiving Project. The date is October 2nd, 2025, and this is our second recording session. Karen, thank you for having us back. So last time we covered a lot of ground. We talked about your early life and meeting Tuffy and the early days at the Opry. There were a few things I wanted to kind of go back and touch on that we didn't get to last time, if you don't mind. So you had described your wedding day. You mentioned you got married in the morning, you went out to lunch, and then you had a show that night.
Right.
What do you remember about that day?
Well, it was very hectic because we had just had a show the night before as well. So we had finished that show, and then we had to get just a real short time to go get married. So we met the pastor that morning, and he married us. Then we went and got lunch, and then we had to get back right away because there was so much always to do on a Saturday. We had to get the concession stand ready. We had to have rehearsal, and then set up the house and get it all. It was just another day. Plus, we had the following morning, we had a fair convention, which was an audition for the coming summer fairs, county fairs, all through Kansas. It was over in Kansas. So we had to be in Topeka like 7 a.m. the following morning. So it was just and I had asked Tuffy, I said, well, don't you want to wait and take some time? But he said, no. He said, get married. Let's just get married. So that's what we did.
No pause, even on your wedding day.
Nope. It was just like, okay. And it was done.
Do you remember who performed that night? Was it still the band at that point? Were you having people come in?
It was just our regular show, regular band.
How did people react when they found out you'd gotten married?
It was funny because his family was so welcoming to me, and they were really, they just really took me in. And the people at everybody there, our regulars that would come on a regular basis, they were really happy. It was halfway through the show that Tuffy finally said something. He said, oh, by the way, Karen and I got married this morning. And, then it all changed. Everybody was so happy, all the band members, because nobody really noticed. The only thing they noticed was that I wasn't back in the concession stand. Tuffy, that evening, Tuffy had me sit down in the front row. So, and that was nice. I didn't have to work on my wedding day.
As you shouldn't. Okay, we talked just briefly last time about when the kids were born. Mm-hmm. Can you tell me a little bit more about what it was like to have young kids and also be running the show, raising them in that environment?
Yeah, it's one of those things where, anybody who has a kid really just has to combine them into their life. Life goes on, and you realize that, you just bring them along. You just, they're part of what you do. And that's the way our kids were. I don't know if other people's, are like that, but we just made them a part of what we were. They were a part of the Opry. Everybody, all our regular people would, they knew the kids, and it was just like a family type thing. It just was another thing to add on to what we had to do. So we did it. And the kids, my kids were so good. They were the best as babies. And my oldest, he was so good. He slept through the night the first week he was home. He was such a good baby. And I thought, when I found out I was going to have another one, I thought, okay, I'll pay the price this time, because the first one was so good. This one's she was amazing. All 4 of my kids I was so blessed. I was. So they were not any kind of a problem. They things went right on.
Did
Now,
you-
when they got a little older, things changed a little bit because they got kids, once they realize they can make demands, things, then they have things that they want to do, and you have to add all that in, and it got a lot more hectic. But when they were little and babies, it wasn't a problem.
Did they take to life at the Opry? Like, did they like to be involved? And
That was what they did. They just thought everybody did that kind of thing. It was just normal life for them.
did it ever feel like too much?
I don't think so. They never seemed to think so. They loved being kind of a center of attention because they would always be there in the lobby in the evening when people would come in for a show, and everybody would say hi to them, and sometimes people would bring them little candies, and they loved that. They did. They were kind of little celebrities of their own, so they liked that.
How about for you? Did it ever feel you were working full time? You were working at the Opry. You were a mom, young kids.
It was tiring. But I was young then, so I had the energy. And Tuffy was a good dad. He was. He would help me as much as he could. He had his ideas of what parenthood, what the moms did, and what the dads did, and the paths never crossed. Like it was not his job to change diapers. It was not his job to give baths, anything like that. But other than that, he was a good dad. The kids loved him. He was a good guy.
Speaking of Tuffy, we talked about, okay, he entered this contest, this talent show, didn't win, turned around and bought the Opry.
Right. Exactly.
How did he feel about it later on? Did he ever have any regrets? Did he enjoy his work?
No, he loved what he was doing. He always had to be his own boss. And he loved the fact that he had final say over anything that happened there. And that kept him going. He picked all the songs for the shows, he picked the musicians, he picked what was at the concession stand. He loved having his hand in everything. When it came to the work part of it, the cleaning and that was somebody else's job. But he was really good at delegating. So that he really enjoyed it the whole time. Later on, toward I would say, around 1988, 89, he started to get a little weary because we could all kind of tell. At first, we would do at our rehearsals, we would run through every song all the time, and we would add new things in. And by the time he was later on, our rehearsals were really short. He'd say, okay, let's do this song again, this song again, this song again. And, we'd maybe add one song. So he was just getting a little tired of it by then. But during most of it, he was really gung-ho about it. He was always adding. He loved adding the artists. He loved being in contact with the guest artists that we would have, and looking to see when they were touring and what their possibility of doing a drive-through, and so it was always a challenge for him to find somebody new and to add somebody to his list. So he loved doing that part of it too. Not just the performing, but the promoting. He liked that as well.
I apologize. I should have asked ahead of time, but if I may interject and just add on to a question, could you talk about how did you find new artists? How did Tuffy find new artists to promote, to secure them, to get them on board too?
Well, we had contacts with several different artists' agencies, William Morris. I'm sure you guys have heard of William Morris. There was one in Nashville called Billy Deaton. There were just several of them around. And once they found out that we had our venue, then if they had an artist doing a pass through, or if they had a new artist, they would call him and they'd say, hey, so and so is coming through and they'll do the show for this much money and on this date. Are you open? And then we would just, kind of he would always call me at work and he'd say, so and so's coming through. Do you think we should book him? And I'd just tell him, yeah, no. Or we would listen to the radio. And if there was a brand new artist, brand new song, then, and we thought that it was going to be a big one, we would contact their agent and find out if they were coming through. We always tried to get pass-throughs because they were cheaper. That way they just were going to make a few extra dollars as they were going through and had an open night. So that was our big thing. And then we would also have people that would ask us to, some of our normal people would say, hey, Gene Watson's my favorite. Can you book Gene Watson? Why don't you get Gene Watson in? So Tuffy'd, go and look and find out if Gene Watson was available, and, we would book him in. Because if one person liked him, then usually there were a lot of people that did. So there were a lot of different ways that we would have people. And that's kind of how we got Garth. He was coming through he had a pass-through, an open night on a pass-through. And his agent called and said, we got this night open. And he was playing in a bar in St. Louis, and then he had to go to Denver. And so we had the night open. And he was opening for another concert. We already had another concert. I think I told you, J.C. Crowley. We had him booked that night. And the only way we would have Garth would be for an opening. But I told Tuffy, I said, you miss a chance if you don't do this. So he booked him.
All right.
Yeah, it was good.
Okay. You had mentioned last time when you and Tuppy got married, there was a little bit of distance with you and your family. Do you feel comfortable sharing? Was that distance ever reconciled? Were you guys ever?
It was over time, a lot of time, because my family just didn't trust him. They thought that he had married me strictly because I would be able to provide income for him. I said, thanks a lot. Give me credit for nothing. But no, it took quite a while, and there were just a lot of little things that would happen that they would just say, see. We were struggling. It was expensive to operate the business, and they would invite me for something, to join them on a trip or something. And I said, I just can't afford to go. I said, see, we told you. But my dad was the hardest one to convince. But finally, after we'd been married probably about 15 years, my dad finally softened up a little. So it all worked out good. Tuffy took him it was Christmas time, and we asked my mom what Dad would want for Christmas, and she said, well, he loves smoked salmon. So Tuffy took him this big, huge thing of smoked salmon, and my dad, he thought Tuffy was okay then. So if we'd have known that years before, we'd have done it earlier.
Did they ever come to the Opry? Did they ever?
I don't think any of them ever did. None of them ever did. Nope.
So they didn't get to see what you all were doing there.
No. When Tuffy and I were dating, and he was playing at a restaurant over off Ward Parkway. My sister came and watched him play. And so they were impressed with his performance because, you know, he was on the records and he had his they would see some of the videos. I would show them videos, but they never came. Never came. I don't know. They didn't like country music. So I think that was a big thing. So it kind of has to grow on you.
Because you didn't like country music either when you started.
I didn't, but it's all good.
We talked off camera, if you wouldn't mind repeating for the camera, you love the Beatles.
Oh yeah,
And you loved the Beatles before you met Tuffy. And
huge Beatles fan.
how was that ever incorporated at the Opry?
Just me asking Tuffy to try and do some Beatles songs. And because he liked the Beatles. I mean, the Beatles had so much influence on every type of music. So he liked the Beatles too. As I told you before, he would get a Beatles song, and he just always performed too fast. Even the country songs, if it had a steady rhythm on it, he'd always do it double time. And we had the hardest time keeping up with him. And the song I remember most was, I asked him to do a Beatles song. He picked 8 days a week. And, you know, it's just a real steady rhythm on that. And he went so fast. And so it's a walk-in bass. And so I said, okay, never mind. We'll just skip that. So that kind of took that out of that. But he always knew I liked the Beatles. For Christmas, he would get me, you know, Beatles t-shirts, and, you know, he always knew I was a Beatles fan. And he didn't mind that our grandson's name is Jude. He thought that was pretty cool anyway.
How did the community respond to the Opry? What did you feel like their involvement was, or their engagement? They
were great. We had so many people around us. I think I told you last time that we had a mailing list, and we would have to hand address all these newsletters, and we did it 3 or 4 times a year. And it would take forever because his mailing list was this huge thing of just little recipe cards that we would have people sign and put their address on. And we would tell people in the neighborhood that we were having a newsletter party. And we would set up tables in the lobby, tables and chairs, and people would come in. They would just come in and help us sign all the, you know, address all these things and put the stamps on, because they just loved being a part of it. They loved helping us. They were very happy to have us there. Englewood was different back then. Englewood, it wasn't an arts district. The businesses that had been there usually a long time. You know, there was the drugstore, there was the Ben Franklin, that had been there a long time. We got to be really good friends with the Ben Franklin people. The cafe that's there now was there then. And it was a really good neighborhood community. You know, everybody worked together. We were all behind each other, just the way it is now.
But you said not the same arts kind of.
No, it was just a business district. Yeah, there was a jewelry store, there was a dentist office, a dry cleaner, where my daughter's shop is now was a dry cleaner, a photographer. I mean, there was just all different kinds of businesses there, and everybody was helping each other. You know, it was a good atmosphere. And even, like I said, the neighbors, you know, just the people around. A lot of them would get, you know, just come. They would come every Saturday. They just have to walk up the street. They'd be there every Saturday. So We got to know a lot of them. It was a family atmosphere, very much.
Okay. What did you feel like were the hardest times?
Well, of course, the hardest part was the finances, because it was fun to operate it and we enjoyed it a lot, but the bills come due. And we seated 1,000 people. And to heat and air condition that place was so expensive. And this was back in the 1980s, and rent then was $1,000 a month, which back then was quite a bit. And the finances were hard because we were raising the kids and trying to keep the Opry open. And I was working, it seemed like almost everything that I would make would go into keeping that open. And it was cash flow that kept us going, but we weren't able to, save anything or anything like that. That was the hardest part of it, was the finances. And that basically, that's what took us down at the end, because someone decided to buy the theater building, and they of course they offered it to us first. They said, "You're there, you have first," and we didn't have the resources. So that's what ended up somebody else getting it. So yeah, it was fun, but it would have been better if we could have made a little better money.
So Tuffy first bought it in 1980. Is that correct?
1980.
Okay. And then you operated through the 80s. And then when did you finally have to?
We closed there in 1989, the summer of '89, and we moved out to John Knox Pavilion out here in Lee Summit. We were looking at other places we decided we would just rent and keep promoting the Nashville artists, not do a show every week. So we rented the pavilion. We had quite a few artists out there. We did that until 1991. And then it just got to be too expensive. For all the work it was involving, it wasn't worth it. Plus, we weren't getting any younger. The kids were getting older. And then we got the opportunity to travel with the family show. So we opted to do that instead.
So before all that, before the move in the 80s, you said kind of a constant cash flow. Was there ever times when you were like, is this worth it?
Oh, yeah, all the time. I'd be, scrubbing in the bathroom after a show, cleaning up the bathrooms. I say, what am I doing here? What is this worth it? But it was my husband's dream, and that's our job, is to support them in what they want to do. So, it was a labor of love, and I loved it too. I loved his family was a big part of the whole operation. His mom was there all the time, his sisters, his cousins, his aunts and uncles. They from the beginning, they just came in and they were there all the time. And it was just being a family operation. It was worth it. I mean, and looking back and seeing and knowing the difference it made in so many lives, the musicians and the people that attended the shows, it's nice to know now that it was worth it. It was well worth it.
Absolutely. Okay, so it's the late 80s and finances are tough.
Right.
But so ultimately, what changed was the building was selling.
Right.
Who had owned it before?
I I can't remember his name. It was an individual that just owned the building, and we just rented it from him. The business had been set up there previously, and we just took over the lease. And then when it sold, he had asked us previously if we wanted to buy it, and we just couldn't buy it because he had taken offers on it. And the lady that wanted it was very serious about buying it, and so we had no choice, had to let it go. But like I had said, by then Tuffy was getting kind of worn out of doing the same thing every week. 9 years was a little much, every week to be doing. And we had the kids getting older, and so they were getting interested in more different things. And Tuffy was too. Tuffy was getting pulled into, he loved selling stuff at the flea market. So he would buy things and then go to the flea markets. And I think that was part of what wore him out, because he would go to the flea market on Saturday mornings to sell stuff. And then, because he was such a salesman, he loved doing that. And then he would have to pack up and come and do the show in the evening. And it was wearing on him. But he was making money at the flea market. So that's why after it sold, he just started doing flea market stuff, and then bringing in the artists at the pavilion.
You guys were doing shows. Did you ever go on vacation? Were you able to go out of town?
Oh yeah. We got married in 81. We didn't get to go on a honeymoon until 83, because we booked. I can't remember who it was. Oh, Conway Twitty. We had Conway Twitty, and we made good money on Conway. We did. The bigger the artist, of course, the more expensive they were, but the more you could charge for tickets and sell out. And we sold out 2 shows for him. And so we had some funds, and we finally got to go to Florida for our honeymoon 2 years later. But it was fun. And we traveled a lot with the show. Like I said, we went and did the fair convention the day after we got married, and we booked quite a few fairs for that. And during the summertime, we would go on, we would like do a show on a Saturday night, and say we had a fair on Tuesday. We would take off right after the show, because the band would all be there. And we would drive out, say to Montana. We did several in Montana. We did a bunch of them in Wyoming. We just did fair conventions all around as much as we could. And we would go and do fairs. And so that was our travel. Those were our trips. They were working trips, and we got paid for it, but it was fun. And we just took the kids with us. They always went with us.
Did you like being on the road?
Oh, I loved it. I loved traveling. I did love it. It was always fun because we would be used to seeing our regulars for Saturday night respond to Tuffy, because they were there every week. And it was always good to see a good crowd and see their response to him, because he was a good entertainer. He really was. And he knew how to capture an audience. So it was always good to know that we had really entertained some people. It was so funny how the different states were so different. Like Nebraska, that was the friendliest state. Those people were the best. Iowa, and there's just a state line between them. But the Iowa people, they were not, we would be setting up, and they would be looking at us like, do you ever see The Music Man? The song about the Iowa way of thinking. So true. But most states, Alabama was great. Oklahoma was great. Most of them were really, really good.
Do you have a favorite place you all traveled, or what's the furthest you traveled?
I think the furthest was Montana. We went to Montana, and that was a long way. And let's see, I'm trying to think what my favorite one was. Probably in Nebraska. We did Norfolk, Nebraska. There were some people there, and after the show, of course, these were small towns, and everything was closed. All the booths were closed, and we would be starving. And these people had brought like this huge picnic to the concert. And after the show, we were asking them, where can we get a meal, after the show? And they said, well, there's nothing open. They said, we have all of this here. Just take it with you. They said, we were playing in Ida Grove, which is Iowa, which is right across the line there from Norfolk, not too far. They said, we'll just meet you there next week over in Ida Grove and pick them up. And they did. They gave us that's how friendly these people were. So I always remember Norfolk because of that. But then it was a good example of how people would respond. They knew we were just down to earth people. And we always tried to take a kid act with us. We had several kids that were super talented, and people love kid acts, and they would be a part of the show, because it was just variety. And at our fairs, the kid acts were always one of the big, Of course, we had to take the parents with us, but that was always good. Had some really talented kids.
What kind of acts did they have, the kids?
Mostly singing. We had this one couple of kids. They were really young, and they harmonized so well. They were so good. And then we had Elijah Chastain, he was like 10, 11 years old, and people loved him. He was one of the best musicians. He played guitar, banjo, fiddle, anything with strings on it that kid could pick up. And he was so good. And he and Tuffy had this really good relationship. And so they would joke off each other, and, a lot of improvisation type things. And it was great. And then we had this one little diva. She was something else, but she could sing well, and she loved Loretta Lynn. She would sing Loretta Lynn songs, so she would dress up in these fancy little Loretta Lynn gown things, and get her hair all done. And so she was another. So it was just a variety. It was fun though, and the kids were always so good. The parents not always so good, but the kids were fun.
In what way?
They just wanted to perform. Some kids are just born to do that. And that's what they wanted to do. And of course the parents were like, they were most of them were really strict. They were real leery about having their kids in the show business. So, and that's understandable. I would have been too. Can't say that I wouldn't have been.
Okay, so it's 89, and they're selling the building. You said the person that bought it was really motivated.
Yeah.
What were they wanting to do with the building?
They were wanting to do what we did. They were wanting to do a show, except they didn't want to do country music. They wanted to do rock. And so after we left, she came in and started to do the same thing, but with rock bands, a different rock band every week. And Inglewood wasn't prepared for that, because your country clientele are very family, very laid back, and the rock community is a whole different thing. And it ended up, she was only there for she only ran the shows for a few months because they would have to call police about every weekend because they would have fights. And because the kind of rock bands that she had were not pop rock, they were the heavy rock. And, a lot of them from out of town or even local ones, they would draw more of a really rough crowd. And it didn't work out. Inglewood just wasn't ready for that. So a lot of people quit coming. They just didn't come. I'm sorry about that.
No, you're right.
You're right. That is an interesting choice to come into a community with a built country base.
Yeah.
And
She must have thought she could do better with rock. I mean, understandably, because that draws a younger crowd that's always looking for something to do on the weekends. And, evidently she did draw them, but it wasn't, I don't know if it was the atmosphere, if they came with a chip on their shoulder or what, but they said that they ended up having to call the police almost every weekend because there'd be fights out in the parking lot. And so it was a pretty rough crowd, I guess. We were busy, doing other things, but
what did they call it?
I don't even know. I don't remember. But she had her mind set on doing that, and just it didn't play out, which is a credit to country music.
So you all had to let the place go. How did Tuffy take it?
He was a little disappointed that we weren't able to buy the theater and keep going. But then again, like I said, he was getting kind of worn out about it. So he really took it okay. He said, well, we'll just do our own thing. We'll just travel and, continue to do the fairs, which we did, and, keep as many musicians together as we can. And so he was pretty much okay with that.
Yeah.
How did you feel about it?
I was relieved. I really was, because it was a lot of work every Saturday. Still to this day, Saturday evenings come and I think, thank God I don't have to clean that bathroom. Because it was a lot of work every Saturday for all those years. And it wasn't just Saturday. We would do like a Friday gospel show, and then on Sundays, a lot of the pass-throughs were on Sundays. So we would do Sundays. So I'd have, a Friday, Saturday, and Sunday on the weekends. And then I'd have to go back to work on Monday. So it was like, oh, hallelujah.
So tell me about the pavilion. How did that come about?
We were just looking for a venue, a place, and we had heard about the pavilion, and we talked to them. The ladies that operated it at the time were so nice. They were very nice. The biggest problem with the pavilion was the acoustics, because I don't know if you've ever been in there, but it's got this, it's like a pyramid top on it, and at the time they didn't have any acoustic panels, and the echo was really bad. So it was a great venue, and they were so nice. Parking was great, security was great, everything was really good, but the sound just wasn't good enough. It just wasn't, and we liked to be sure that people got their money's worth when they bought a ticket. So for our own shows there, because we did holiday shows, we would do New Year's Eve things like that. For our own shows, it was okay. But for our big artists, it was not the best. And so that's why we ended up. Plus, again, it was so expensive, because not being our own venue, we also had to buy insurance for every show, and the insurance was more than the rent was. So it was expensive. So just quit doing that.
Did the people follow you? Do you feel like the community?
Yeah, a lot of people did. We had 61 Country Radio was the radio station back then for country music, and we had a lot of support from the radio station, and they would always advertise for us. You know, they would encourage people to come out and see, and so we had a lot of people. Our regulars would come out, and then we would get, you know, the people from around for all the other artists. So it was well supported. It just was, you know, a little too expensive to keep going on it.
So you did that for,
We did that for about 2 years.
and primarily artists coming through.
Yeah. Yeah. We did a few shows of our own, like I said, some of the holiday shows, things like that, but mostly just that's where we had George Jones and Paul Overstreet. Who else did we have there? Lori Morgan. And I'm trying to think, just, you know, some of the names that were really popular then at the time.
Were you doing the same schedule of like a Friday show, a Saturday show?
No, whenever they were available is when we would rent. As long as the building was available and they were passing through, we would go ahead and book them. And it was great. We had a lot of people that, I mean, we had such good support. There was a place over here right by the pavilion that was a chicken place. I mean, they had, you know, it was fancy chicken place, and they would cater in for our artists. They would bring these huge tubs of their fried chicken and mashed potatoes and green beans and just donate it and say, you know, and all they asked was that the artist on stage would say, and thank you to, I can't remember the name of it, but thank you to them for, you know, catering for us. So we had a lot of support from the community. It just financially wasn't working out well.
So when did you decide enough's enough?
I think Lori Morgan was our last one that we had, and we just didn't make money on it, and all that work, and all that, and not come out ahead. We just pretty well decided that we would stick with letting other people pay us to perform, and touring and traveling and doing that, and that's what we did. We switched over from being the venue for other people to being the artists at other people's venues. And it went well for the most part. We had there's just a lot of, when you travel with a band, there's just always so many stories. We had one show booked in Louisiana over in the wintertime. And you know, you think Louisiana is going to be fine in the wintertime. You're heading south. They had an ice storm in Louisiana the days before we had our show, but we were contracted. So we went down there and power was out everywhere. So they had some people come in and hook up a generator so that, because they had to honor the tickets. So we had a generator trying to provide us enough power to light the auditorium and for our equipment, you know, our sound equipment, and the breaker kept going off. So we'd be doing a song and all of a sudden the breaker would blow. And somebody'd have to run back and shoot the breaker on the generator, and we'd pick up where we left. But we finished the show. We did what we had to do. Always a challenge, but it was fun.
So after you transitioned to doing just band work, did that feel like an easy decision at the time?
I'm sorry?
Like an easy decision?
It was, because we were definitely going to be making some money on it. You know, the work was going to be worth it. So that makes a big difference when you're trying to support a family.
So were you doing that full time? Were you doing it just on the weekends and still at the pharmacy?
Just usually through the summer because that's when most of the fairs were, and that's where we got most of our work, was like at county fairs, festivals, things like that. Then Tuffy got invited to do a school tour. There's an organization that contacted him, and they had someone who, what they did is they would book people at school assemblies, and they just had all speakers and just all different kinds. And they had one music artist that had gone through most of the school year, but had a family emergency and had to quit, and they needed somebody. So they heard about Tuffy and asked him if he'd be interested in finishing out that school tour year. And so Tuffy said, well, yeah, I'm not doing anything else right now. So he went by himself. And all he asked was that they would have a piano for him to play. And he went and finished out the year, and I had the kids at home. And he loved it. It was great because he was performing. I mean, it was from kindergarten through college, and he never knew. He would do 2 or 3 shows a day, go to all these different places, and he just loved performing. So, and the schools loved him. So the next year, the organization asked if he would do it again. And he said, well, I want to do it again, but I want my family band. I want you to book up my family band, because by then the kids were starting to do some music. And so they said, okay. And Tuffy shot them a figure and didn't think that they would accept it, but they did. So the following year, it was 94, we ended up touring for the school year. We sold our house. We lived in a van, for the entire school year. And we'd do 3 or 4 shows a day in different cities. Back then there was no GPS. So we lived off of a trucker's map to find out where these little bitty cities were. But the kids had quite an education that year. They got to see most of the country. We went over most of the country. So it was fun.
How old were the kids that year?
Let's see. Tuffy Jr. was 12, Sarah was 11, and Jesse was 6. So Molly wasn't even here yet. So, but we homeschooled, and they would do their lessons in the van on the way to the next school. We'd get there and we'd set up, and we had a routine. We'd get set up, do the show, finish, pack up, go to the next one. It was so different then because we wouldn't know. There was no internet. We had no connections to wherever we were going. We wouldn't even know if there was a hotel in the city until we got there. So we would hit these little bitty towns and have a show, say at 7:45 the next morning, and find out that the closest hotel was 20 miles down the road. So it brought us all together as a family. We all worked together. It was fun.
What did the kids play? What instruments?
T was our drummer, and luckily they had just come out with the electronic drum sets. So you just pick up the whole set, take it, and plug it in. It was great. We didn't have to set up a drum set. And then Sarah played keyboard. She had a little synthesizer keyboard that she played, and Jessie sang and played tambourine. She was only 6. But it was fun. We all, we had matching outfits, and it was fun. It was hard work, of course, traveling every day. But it was so good for the kids. I look back on it and I think, that was really something. I still have the notebook because I had to keep a notebook of, our route and all our dates, our calendar dates. And I kept in the notebook all these letters because we got a lot of letters from the kids. Because after the assembly, a lot of the teachers would go back and say, okay, write a thank you letter to, Tuffy and his family. So I've still got a bunch of those in this notebook. It's so cool. Yeah, brings back lots of memories.
Did you have to? So you're doing this for schools. Did you have to have like a message or or would just music?
It was just music. Tuffy wanted to expose a lot of the kids to the fact that kids can play instruments and kids can learn music, and that there's different kinds of music. Like he'd do a boogie woogie, and then we would do a song from a Disney movie. And then we, just all different kinds. It wasn't all just country music. He wanted to let all these different kids. And most of what the teachers' letters said was that it was so good for their kids to see a family working together. Because, families at that time, the mom had a job, the dad had a job, the kids went to school, and they'd have half an hour for dinner together, and then they'd all go to bed. And they said that it was just so inspiring for a lot of the kids to see a family that worked together. So, and that was good. And I loved that. It was great to have the whole family together all the time. It was really good. A lot of miles, but
So you did that for just the 1 year?
we did 1 year, and then we were booked for the following year to do it again. And because they'd had such good results with us, good response. But my daughter, Sarah, had to have hip surgery. Yeah. And so she was, we had canceled the year. She was in a body cast for 8 weeks. So yeah, so it was too much. We couldn't do it. And then that year, Tuffy started going to the flea market all the time. And he got more into that business, buying and selling and stuff like that, because he was making some pretty good money at it. And again, he was a celebrity at the flea market. People would come out just to buy from him because he would be so entertaining just talking to people, and people would just love to come and see him. So he lived on that. He just loved being a celebrity, being he would always have a new joke for somebody, or he always made people feel good, and people loved that, and they'd buy a bunch from him. So once he got started doing that, he would play mostly at churches. We would get asked to do some things for some church services, and he played like that. And then he just kind of got away from performing. He didn't have a lot of opportunity to perform, and he was always so busy on the weekends with his food business, selling the foods at the flea market, that he just kind of gave up playing. Plus, he would not practice or play on his own. He had to have someone listen to him. And at the time I was working, and the kids were so busy, and it was hard for him to find somebody to listen to him. And so he wouldn't even go out. We had a music room set up in our home, and I'd get it all ready for him. I'd say, go out and play, write something. He was a good writer. He wrote songs. And I'd say, go write something. And he'd say, well, come on out here with me. I'd say, well, I can't right now. So he wouldn't go. And that's kind of what took him away from being the musician that he really was. It was sad, Later in his life, Molly was born in 98. And she never saw him perform other than at church. So I know it was sad. It would have been nice if she could have seen him. She loves watching the videos. She's really proud of him. But it's sad that she didn't get to see him at his best.
So after the year of the family band, y'all came back here, resettled, got a place again.
Sarah had her surgery, and I was just working full time.
Did you go back to the pharmacy?
Oh yeah. I had a great job. I've always been so lucky. I've had the best pharmacy jobs, but and then the kids were in their teen years. They were, early teens. They had all their activities and things that they were doing. So I just, we ended up being pretty much just a normal family for a while. We had, like I told you, we had a beautiful home out in South Lee Summit. When we bought it in 97, and we were just on the edge of the city limits, and there was nothing out there. It was 20 acres. We bought 20 acres in this really nice house, and it was a miracle. It was a God thing, but then everything started to grow up around it. Now it's in the middle of a big neighborhood, but back then we were kind of country people, and Tuffy loved to entertain. So his big thing, every 4th of July, he would have a huge picnic. I mean, we would have 200 people. There was a swimming pool. We had an in-ground pool in the backyard, and the pool would be packed with people. We would have, parking. People would be parked all over our yard, and he would shoot off huge fireworks. And we did that for probably 15 years, every 4th of July. And he was so funny because we'd be going down the aisle in the grocery store, and he'd stop and talk to somebody, just randomly, and say, "Hey, what are you doing 4th of July? We live right out here. Come on and join." So we would have so many people every 4th of July. That was his big thing. He loved being the center of attention and the celebrity. And a lot of people around Lee Summit still remember 4th of July's.
Did people ever reference or talk to you about the Opry or mention?
Yeah, and he would play. He would go into the music room and play during the picnic. People would come in and hear him, and they would have known him, say, from the flea market or the grocery store, and they would say, "I had no idea he had that kind of talent." And they would say, "Why won't he do it? Why is he not performing?" I don't know, because he's not, because he won't. But it was a good time. It was.
Why do you think he stopped performing or got away from it?
I think he was doing well at the flea market and making money at it, and he knew that he wasn't going to be able to make as much money performing. He in our music room, he decided that he was going to record. He was going to start recording, doing his own recordings and recording other people. So he went and invested in this huge big sound recording board and all the high-tech stuff, and so we got it all set up. And then it was trying to figure out how to operate it. And that was the downfall, because it was so, you had to know all this technical jargon, and it was more. And I told him, I said, "That's your baby. I got my job, you do your thing." And it just was so high tech that he couldn't figure it out. He did some recording on it, but it was way beyond what someone who isn't trained knows how to do. He just overbought. So that stuff sat there till we moved out of the house, and I ended up giving it to one of my son's friends, Because, when you bought it in, say, 2000, it, by, when we sold the house in 21, it was way past its. So I just ended up giving it to one of my son's friends who's a recording artist. He's a recording engineer, and he keeps it as memorabilia. But back in the day, it was state of the art, just like anything nowadays.
Do you think Tuffy was sad to be away from music, or did he enjoy what he was doing
No,
more?
he always wanted to do it, but he, like I said, until he would have someone to listen to him, he just didn't have the motivation. He just wanted to be paid attention to. Whenever I learned how to play, I loved just playing, just learning it. But his mom told me that when he was learning how to play piano, he wouldn't practice. She'd put the piano in his bedroom for him to practice. He moved it out to the living room, and he made them turn the TV off while he did his practice. He always had to be the celebrity, the center of attention. And she warned me about that when we got married. She said, now you know that he's always got to be in the front light. So, I was aware of that. I knew that. But it ended up being his downfall by him not just wanting to do the music himself. He wanted to perform for somebody. And it would have been good. And then as we get older, our fingers, they're not as fast as they used to be. And he would get frustrated because he wasn't able to run his riffs the way he used to do, because he hadn't been practicing. And then when he would get frustrated, he would just slam it shut and be done. So it was just a natural progression, sadly.
How about yourself? Did you keep doing music in any way, or?
I wish. Last my last birthday, I turned 70, and my kids always knew. I'd had a Fender bass that I always played. I loved it. I still have it, but they always knew I had wanted a Hofner bass, like Paul McCartney's. And so they got me a Hofner bass for my 70th birthday, and I just haven't had the chance to practice it as much as I'd like to. So that's on my bucket list, is to get my chops back up on my Hofner. But that was so nice of them to do that. That was so nice of them. It was great.
How about your kids? Do they keep doing music, or have they kept up with music at all?
My son, Tuffy Jr., he works for, he does the music. That's his thing. He's a music engineer, a recording engineer. He books artists. He works for Time Warner Music. He books artists and he writes music. Of course, my daughter Molly in New York is a performer. She sings and dances and she writes her own stuff. Jessie isn't so much into the music. She loves the music, but she doesn't perform it at all. And then my daughter Sarah in Pennsylvania, she loves to listen to music, but she's not a musician. She never really, she liked the shows that we did and she liked performing, but she's got her other, she's a psychology therapist. So that's a whole different thing. So, to each his own. Like I always told my kids, if everybody in the world liked the same thing, it would be a very boring world.
You mentioned last time Tuffy Jr. changed his name
Yeah,
to Ash.
to Ash.
Is there a story there?
Yeah, he and his dad did not get along. They both had very strong wills. And so when he moved to, my son moved when he was 19, he moved to LA because he had some other friends. He was a drummer at the time he was drumming, and their band decided to go to LA, to move to LA because they had some friends out there. So they went out there, and he loved the fact that his name was Tuffy at the time because people remembered that. You know, if your name is Steve, Joe, Mike, that's everybody's name. But Tuffy, they remembered. So people would always remember his name. And he said, he thought that was really good. And then he and his dad had a bad falling out over money. It was a financial thing. And so my son just said, nope. He says, I'm not having anything to do with Dad anymore. I don't want that name. And so we always called him T. And so he just went by T instead of Tuffy. And then he got into this transcendental stuff, and which is good. It's all good, this internal meditation and all that. And he decided that he wanted to change his name and call himself Ash, like the phoenix, So that's why he's in everybody. And now he lives in Austin, and they all know him as Ash. I still call him T, but his name there is Ash. So, like I said, to each his own. They can do whatever they want.
Do you see a lot of Tuffy in your kids?
In my daughter, Jessie, especially. Very much. She is so her dad. I loved him dearly, but he was a master manipulator. He knew immediately everybody's soft spot, and he would play on that as far as getting things he wanted. She is the same way. She's so much like her dad, personality-wise. She sparkles. I don't know if you met her, but she does. She's got this charisma that he had, and she just draws people all the time. She has the shop with her in Englewood. She has people come in there, just to come in there, not to buy stuff, but just because they like the feel of being around her. She has that is just like her dad was. And if she needs somebody to do something for her, she is so good at that manipulation. I am such a victim of that because I fall for it every time. But she is just, she even has a cup I got her that says like father, like daughter. It always says like father, like son, like father, like daughter, because she's Tuffy Jr. She is.
Which of the kids are more like you?
Like me, Molly. My daughter Molly in New York. I grew up on Broadway musicals. My mom was big on Broadway musicals, and that's all we ever listened to. And so I always loved Broadway. And Molly, when she was in school, none of my other kids even cared about it, but when she was in school, she got the theater bug. And, when I was in school, I was in all the shows. I did all the theater stuff. I did community theater, that was my thing. And she got the theater bug. And that's what took her to New York. She went to theater school in New York, still there, still performing. So she's mini me. She's my best friend.